So not wasting any more of your time, let me start with the first one. The first session, which commences now, is for a period of 1 hour, which includes the question and answer session. I would request the august gathering to kindly try and stick to the timings so that, like in military, we always stick to the timings. The topic for the first discussion today is Reflections, Diamond Jubilee of the 1965 Indo-Pak War. And the panelists for this discussion are Major General Bobby Grewal, Air Vice Marshal Arjun Subramaniam, Brigadier Satinder Singh, and this session will be moderated by, if I may say, the birthday boy, Lieutenant General J.S. Chima.
Thank you,
we
sir.
wish, sir, a very happy birthday,
Thank you
good
very
health and happiness always from all of us here.
Thank you, sir.
May I request the panelists to kindly come up, and as they come up, a word about all of them. It's a big task when I get all the CVs and then I've got to constrict it into a few lines. It's an ardent task. So if I'm not able to do justice, please do pardon me. Major General B.S. Grewal, a cavalier who is an alumnus of YPS Patiala. He's held various key appointments in the Indian Army, the last being Deputy Commandant of the National Defence Academy. He has served as Director, Maharaja Ranjit Singh Preparatory Institute, also as Director of YPS Patiala. Next on the panel, we have Air Vice Marshal Arjun Subramaniam. He is a distinguished fighter pilot and is the former President's Chair of Excellence in the National Security Affairs at NDC. He is on the review editorial board of several journals and writes extensively for leading newspapers and magazines on military and strategic issues. The third panelist for this session is Brigadier Satinder Singh, a second-generation officer who was commissioned in 8 Mahar, which he later commanded. Post-superannuation, he has served as Director, Defence Services, Punjab. And this very interesting and sought-after session will be moderated by Lieutenant General J.S. Chima, who superannuated from the Indian Army as Deputy Chief of the Army Staff. He was General Officer Commanding of 11 Corps in 2015 and 16 during the Golden Jubilee of the 1965 war. The General Officer is an ardent sportsman and has been the founder VC of Maharaja Bhupinder Singh Punjab Sports University located at Patiala. Ladies and gentlemen, over to the first session. Thank you.
Good morning. Admiral Arun Prakash, former Chief of the Naval Staff, General Shergill, Chairman, Military Lit Festival Association, officers, ladies, my dear students and fellow panelists, a very good morning to each one of you. The 1965 India-Pakistan War, though fought 60 years back, is still considered as one of the most significant military engagement of Southeast Asia. It is still being debated whether this war was a victory for India or it was a stalemate. But before we come on to this question, I would like to give you a very brief overview of the 1965 war for the benefit of the young students from various colleges and schools. Well, Pakistan's gamble to start the 1965 war stemmed from its overconfidence and underestimation of India's military capability following India's defeat in the 1962 war. They continued to pursue this agenda, and they first wanted to test the water of India's capabilities in the run of Kutch in April 1965. India's restraint was taken as a weakness. It reinforced the Pakistan perception that India would be a walkover. The Prime Minister had just changed over, and they planned on a very audacious mission, Operation Gibraltar. Well, gentlemen, this Operation Gibraltar, a massive infiltration campaign into Jammu and Kashmir, was intended to initiate an uprising and thereby defreeze the Kashmir problem, which was lying dormant after the 48 war. Unfortunately, the people of Kashmir, instead of siding with the irregulars, supported the Indian Army with critical information, and to top it all, India took the battle across the ceasefire line and capturing important features like the Hajipir Pass and certain important heights in Titwal sector, Punch sector, as well as Kargil point 13620. This obviously rattled the Pakistan establishment. Frustrated but not undated, they launched a next ambitious mission, that is Operation Grand Slam, which was a full-fledged offensive launched in Akhnur sector on 1st of September 1965. They achieved quick success as far as this offensive was concerned, but after some time, the offensive lost the momentum. And the Indian Prime Minister on 3rd of September issued his higher direction of war, which was, as shown on the slide, it was to defend against Pakistan's attempt to grab Kashmir and make it very clear to Pakistan that Pakistan would not be allowed to capture Kashmir in any manner. Second, destroy the Pakistan's armed forces. And third, capture or occupy only the minimum territory that would lead to the destruction of enemy's armed forces. Air Force was tasked only to support the army operations, and the Prime Minister categorically asked the Air Chief not to target the civilian areas. Well, from this higher direction of war, set the ball rolling for the offensive to be launched by the Indian Army. The first offensive launched was on 6th of September off Riddle in 11 Corps zone, covering the area from Dera Baba Nanak to Fazilka, Suleimanki. This was a multi-pronged offensive along the three axes as shown on the slide, that is Amritsar Atari, Barki axis, Kasur axis, and along with two subsidiary offensive in Dera Baba Nanak as well as Suleimanki, defending Suleimanki and Hussainiwala. How the war, how the plans unfolded will be covered by the subsequent speakers. 2 days later, one corps launched an offensive in Sialkot sector and covered Philora, fighting fierce tank battles, and how again the battle unfolded, it would be taken by General Garewal. Now what we would debate on this thing and what would be our modus operandi to carry the discussion forward, I will ask my fellow panelists, Brigadier Satinder, to highlight the progress of operations in 11 Corps zone, taking into account what was the planning, what was the objectives worked out by 11 Corps. Followed by General Garewal to take on the 1 Corps operations, what was planned and what did they achieve. Thereafter, we have Air Vice Marshal Arjun Subramaniam with us. He will highlight the Air Force aspects and give a strategic outcome of the war before we start the next part of the discussion, how the things unfolded, so that we can come conclusively to deduce whether it was a victory or a stalemate. Over to Brigadier Satinder.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everybody. I'll be taking on the operations of 11 Corps, that is starting from, so could we have the slide, sir? I'll be covering the operations from Dera Baba Nanak, that's on the top, and down till Khemkaran, that is to the south, what you can see on the map. Now, what were the aims of the Indian Army here? When Pakistan launched the operation in the Akhnur sector, then it was decided that we have to relieve the pressure as the Pakistanis are advancing rapidly towards Akhnur. That's the time the operation of 11 Corps, that is in this sector which is showing, and in Sialkot sector what we launched. So in 11 Corps, there were 4 thrust lines actually. The first one is along Amritsar, DograI, what is marked toward Lahore. Now on this axis, we had 15 div, less 1 brigade. It was not a complete div. So that 1 brigade was kept as a reserve and also for defense of Amritsar. We had 1 armored regiment, and the second one was down south towards Bikkiwin. You can see the second arrow going towards Barki. And here we had 7 infantry div, again less 1 brigade. That is 29 brigade. And the third axis, that is 4 mountain div from Khemkaran down towards Kasur. This brigade, this div also had less 1 brigade. But each of these axes had 1 regiment each of an armored. And on top, from 7 infantry div, that is the Bikkiwin axis, 29 brigade was pulled out, and 1 brigade and 1 squadron of armor, they were launched towards Dera Baba Nanak's side. Now what was the aim of these offensives? The aim was, on the Pakistan side, as you can see on the slide, you can see the Ishugal Canal. Ishugal Canal was a very formidable kind of an obstacle, a canal, 140 meters to 80 to 140 meters wide, very difficult to cross. But on side of the international border, we did not have any obstacle. So one of the aims was to go and capture the eastern bank of this canal and use it as our obstacle. The next was pose a threat to Lahore. There were a number of bridges on this. Now, if this was the aim and this is how we are doing it, now what happened? As far as 15th Infantry Div was concerned, on 6th September when they launched, they reached up to a place called DograI, and 3 Jat, in a very good and a fantastic action, they actually crossed the bridge. It was partially broken. They went across and captured a place called Batakpur and Atuke Kalam. That means our troops had crossed the Ishugal Canal. But then, due to misunderstandings, miscommunications, 3 Jat was pulled back. We tried in other places also towards the north, but we did not achieve much success. All the troops could manage to reach up to the canal. So just short of the canal, they again formed it, and that's where the operation stopped. Again, 15-day sector only, the operations continued, and later on 22nd September, we again launched operations with 4 brigades, and that's the time, again 3 Jat reached Dograi and captured Dograi. After a very hard-fought battle, they lost about 300 men, and ably supported by the armored squadron and the 2 armored squadrons operating here. Fantastic fights took place here. And that's where the stalemate occurred, and we were just up to the canal. We did reach the canal. As far as the south towards the Burki axis, 7 Div, they were supposed to capture reach the canal by evening. They could not, took some time, and after some time, that was after 4 days, they could manage, and they reached Burki, and the Fosik, they captured Burki after a very, very hard fight. There were 2 brigades in this area. So we had reached the Ishugal Canal. As far as Kasur sector is concerned, we launched 4 mountain div with 2 brigades. Now a mountain div, as we all know, is generally, I'm sorry for that infinitive, it's mountain div. It's designed as a mountain div. And they had an armored regiment also, 9 horse, to which General Shergill belongs, and General Shergill, who's the chairman of the Military Literature Festival, who's very much here. He participated in the battles in near Rajoke, then in Khemkaran, and in Asaluttar. So actually, he's the best person to tell us about the battles of Asaluttar. So when we advanced, when 4 mountain div advanced, they did not, or they could not achieve much success. They reached up to Rohinala, and then they fell back. To the credit of our adversaries, they were prepared for it to launch an offensive, and this particular sector in Kasur area, they had their most formidable force, that was 1 armored div. And they launched 1 armored div with the aim to reach right up to somewhere east of Amritsar, a place called Bias, some people who don't know about it. And their aim was to reach Bias and to cut off the complete area. Major battles were fought here for 3 days. Then we came and took over defensive positions in a place called Asaluttar, which is marked there. And that's the time the Pakistanis launched repeatedly, that is on 8th, 9th and 10th September, they kept on launching. And the credit goes to all the infantry battalions which were there, and the 2 major armored regiments, that is 9 horse and 3 cavalry, who fought very well. And they completely destroyed the war potential of this thing. In Asaluttar, we destroyed about 99 Pakistani tanks and A vehicles. It was a major success. What is the overall assessment here? We, as far as 15 Div is concerned, I'm sorry, I forgot about 29 Brigade. Now 29 Infantry Brigade was a small brigade, 3 battalions for the benefit of the people at the back. Now they were told to just go and capture a small enclave called Jassar enclave. They did succeed, and the Pakistanis repeatedly launched attacks. Now this small force had a major impact on Pakistan. Just north of where Jassar is written on top is the area of the Shakargat bird. This was on 6th, 7th night. The Pakistanis was rattled so much that they moved their 25 cavalry and also 24 brigade with 2nd Punjab down south to face this brigade. They thought it's a major offensive coming here. Now on night of 7th, 8th and 8th early morning was the offensive of our 1 corps, which was coming down from Jammu Kashmir side, which General Garewal will be covering. This was an opportunity lost by us. Had it been coordinated, then this reserve we had already pulled out, and our 1 armored div would have had an easy go through. As far as 15 Div operation is concerned, initially we did achieve success. Later on, we captured territory. And as far as Asulutra is concerned, there is no doubt it is one of the most spectacular and one of the best battles fought by the Indian Army, where we destroyed one armored division of the Pakistani army. So that's what happened in this particular section. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear children and cadets of AFPI. It's such a pleasure to stand before you to be able to talk to you about the operations of One Corps in the 1965 war. We have a lot of ground to cover, and we are going to talk of a very mobile battle. So I'll request the young minds sitting behind to please keep their minds mobile also as we go along. First of all, I'd like to tell you where this battle took place. It took place in an area which we refer to as the Shakargarh Bulge. The important town here is Sialkot, which lies on the northern edge of the Shakargarh Bulge. And then you have Pakistani towns of Chavinda, Pasrur, Shakargarh. On the Indian side, you see Jammu on the top of the slide. And there's a road from Jammu to Samba and on to Pathankot. Please see how close that road is to the international border. And this makes us very vulnerable in the area, because an offensive by Pakistan using the Shakargarh Bulge could cut off the road. So what do? We preempt him and we attack from there. With what? With One Corps. What was One Corps? One Corps was India's mightiest strike force at that time. It comprised of the 1st Armored Division, which is also known as the Black Elephant Division, and for peacetime purposes currently is located in Patiala. It also had 6 Mountain Division and 14 Infantry Division. Please note, 6 was a Mountain Division. It was trained and equipped to fight in the mountains, not in the plains. Why is that so? Because after the 62 war with China, we were increasingly focused upon mountain warfare. So when you compare One Corps to what is today's strike corps, there is no comparison. It's chalk and cheese. It's two entirely different things. But at that time, it was our mightiest strike force, and this is the importance of the Shakargarh Bulge. To recall, Pakistan had launched an offensive in the Akhnur sector on the 1st of September. On the 3rd of September, political directions were given for Indian armed forces to cross the international border. On the 6th of September, 11 Corps attacked, as has been described to you. One Corps, which was the main strike force of the Indian Army, could have attacked the Shakargarh Bulge from either of two directions. One, it could have been launched from the south, from the area of Dera Baba Nanak, Gurdaspur. Two, it could have been launched from the north, from the direction of Samba. For very good reasons, it was decided that we will attack from the Samba direction. There was a debate on it. We will not go into that at the moment. Now, what happened was that as a part of the 11 Corps activities, Dera Baba Nanak was attacked and a small enclave was captured by India's 96th Infantry Brigade on the night of 6th September. There was a stagger of 48 hours between the launch of 11 Corps and One Corps. One Corps was to attack on the 8th of September. On the night of 7th of September, the Pakistani armed forces, which were deployed for the defense of the Shakargarh Bulge, were in a state of panic. What was the panic about? They thought that the attack in the Dera Baba Nanak area, which 11 Corps had launched, is the first step towards the launch of One Corps from DBN. So 24 Infantry Brigade of Pakistan, which is shown in red, and 25 cavalry, which were responsible for the defense of the Bulge, were sent galloping in the night of 7th of September towards Dera Baba Nanak. They reached there at about 0200 hours, found nothing there, and then they were told to turn around and come back. In the meanwhile, one corps offensive commenced from the direction of Samba. So you see the kind of criticality that was created by the fog of war. Both the advancing forces meet head on. From our side, it was the 1st Armored Division which was leading the advance, and there were 2 brigades, 1 Armored Brigade and 43 Lorried Infantry Brigade. 1 Armored Brigade comprised of 3 Centurion tank regiments, namely 4 horse, then known as Hodson's horse, also my regiment, 17 Pune horse and 16 light cavalry. The Centurion was a formidable tank, but an old tank. It was up against the Patton, which was technically far superior to the Centurion. Be that as it may, 16 cavalry and Pune horse led the advance. They met the enemy forces at a place called Gadgore. Who were these enemy forces? 24 Brigade and 25 Cavalry, who had just returned from their misadventure in the DBN sector. They met them head on at a place called Gadgore. Created a block for our forces. 25 Cavalry, Patton Regiment, did a very good job. We must concede. He deployed all his 3 squadrons up, gave a broad front and halted 16 Cavalry and Pune horse temporarily. GOC 1 Armored Division, Major General Rajinder Singh, commonly known as Sparrow, was a very enterprising person. He made a quick assessment of the situation, and the Div Reserve, which was 4 horse, my regiment, Hodson's horse, it was moved forward and released to 1 Armored Brigade to be employed. For a variety of reasons, this Div Reserve was not employed in an offensive manner, and this Div Reserve was used to consolidate the situation because there was a perceived threat to the flank. So we have now 2 forces, 1 Armored Brigade and 43 Lorried Brigade on one side and 24 Brigade and 25 Cavalry on the other, facing each other. On the 9th and 10th of September, reconnaissance was carried out. It had rained, the ground was slushy, the fields were full, there were sugarcane fields, fields of fire were limited. General Sparrow decided on a very bold outflanking maneuver to get behind the enemy and to capture Philora from the rear. I'll take you to this slide. Pak armor and infantry is deployed on the ground in the area of Gadgore. Own troops are in contact. 1 Armored Brigade and 43 Lorried Brigade are pulled back by General Sparrow. The outflanking maneuver is launched from the right flank, and 3 regiments advancing forward towards Philora. The advance was primarily led by 4 horse, that is the HH Arrow, and PH, which is the Pune horse arrow. These 2 regiments advanced very speedily against very stiff opposition, because by this time, elements of 6th Armored Division of Pakistan had also sidestepped into the area, namely 10 cavalry, guides, and 11 PAVO. So there was very stiff resistance, but these 2 regiments were undeterred. These 2 pincers closed in on Philora very speedily on the 11th of September, and 43 Lorried Infantry Brigade launched an attack to physically capture Philora. This was a huge victory for us, because the number of Patton tanks that were destroyed was immense. And more importantly, the myth of the Patton being superior to the Centurion was shattered. The Centurion had performed exceedingly well. When this happened and Philora fell, the next objective was to be Chavinda. Now here there were a series of delays in launching the attack on Chavinda. Initially it was believed that 1 Armored Division should take Chavinda from the line of march. But Chavinda by now was strongly held. Therefore, this task was given to 6th Mountain Division. 6th Mountain Division initially planned the attack on Chavinda on the 17th of September, had to postpone it because some of its units were depleted in strength. Another attack was planned on the 18th of September, had to postpone it because at the last minute they decided to change the direction of attack. Finally, when the attack was launched on the 19th of September, we were unable to capture Chavinda because it had been very strongly reinforced by this time. That delay in the launching of the attack on Chavinda was to prove costly to us. What did we achieve? We destroyed a fantastic number, 196 enemy tanks. These tanks belong to 25 cavalry, they belong to 6 armored division, they belong to elements of 1 armored division of Pakistan. 1 armored division is the one which had launched the attack in the Khemkaran sector. By now, they had sidestepped and moved elements to this area. So this was a complete decimation of Pakistani armor. We were unable to reach the Marala-Ravi link canal, which was our objective. We fell short of it. We were able to capture 465 square kilometers of prime territory. More importantly, territory which could have threatened our highway to Jammu. We were in a position to threaten Pakistani towns of Zafarwal, Chavinda, Badiana and Sialkot, but we did not physically capture these towns. That's how it went. Now what do we think about it? Well, firstly, as I said, there was a little debate on should the corps have been launched from DBN or from Samba. When you launch from Samba, your operations are not very well synergized with what is happening in the 11 Corps zone. But on the other hand, you have this great advantage that you are able to obviate any threat to the Samba highway. DBN was also a viable option, but it involved a river crossing. And that is perhaps the reason why we did not go there. Now I mentioned to you about the Patton and the Centurion. Ladies and gentlemen, the Patton was an American tank. At that time, a state-of-the-art tank. It was current. The Centurion was an old war horse. On paper, there is no comparison between the two. The Centurion was 52 tons, the Patton was lighter, but the Patton was well protected, 160 millimeters of armor. It had a wonderful engine. It had an 800 horsepower engine. The Centurion engine was 635 horsepower. The Patton gun was a 90 millimeter gun. The Centurion gun was a 20 pounder, which equates to 83 millimeter. The Patton had night fighting capability. Night fighting for the driver, infrared. We were blind at night, could do nothing at night. More importantly, the Patton had a rangefinder. It was a stereoscopic rangefinder with which a very high first round hit probability could be ensured. We had nothing of the sort. We had a wonderful thing known as the 3-round technique. Fire 3 rounds, because of the super velocity of the armor piercing discarding sabot, at least 1 if not 2 rounds will hit the target regardless of the range. That was a wonderful thing. Above all, our level of training and motivation was immense. Our gunners were well trained on field miniature ranges. Our drivers were well trained driving in the hilly tracts of Babina, and they were far superior in terms of professionalism. The Pakistanis had just received the Patton. They had not absorbed that technology well enough, and they suffered. There is also a belief that the Pakistanis feared death by fire, and therefore they were quick to abandon their tanks. The Patton armor was brittle. It tended to shatter on impact. The Centurion armor did not shatter on impact. The round would go through. So there were various reasons why the Centurion, which was an old war horse, did well. And I need to mention here that it is the same centurions which did brilliantly well in the 71 war in the very same area. But that's another story. We'll perhaps share it 6 years from now on the 60th anniversary of the 71 war. Did we achieve our overall objectives? No, we did not. Did we get to the Marala-Ravi link canal? No, we did not. But we caused crippling attrition on the enemy. Now was the time for us at the highest level to shift the center of gravity of our attack to this sector, to reinforce 1 Armored Division. GOC 1 Armored Division repeatedly requested that 3rd Cavalry, which was his regiment but had been detached to the Khemkaran sector, and 8th Cavalry, which was an AMX regiment, should revert to him so that his combat power is enhanced and he is able to push on to the MRL. For reasons best known to the command headquarters, this was not agreed to because the army commander felt that it would be more appropriate to pursue the enemy in the Khemkaran sector and restore the sanctity of the international border. When hostilities were called off on the 22nd of September, we could have pressed on, but we needed more combat power, provided a decision is taken at the appropriate level to release that combat power from the 11th Corps Zone. In very brief, ladies and gentlemen, that is what happened in the Corps Zone. Pardon me for rushing through it, but there was a lot of ground to be covered. This was a glorious battle. It is popularly known as the greatest tank battle after the Second World War. And hats off to the Centurion and hats off to regiments like Pune Horse and Hodson's Horse, which performed extremely well. Commandant of Pune Horse, Lieutenant Colonel Tarapur, was awarded a Paramveer Chakra posthumously. Commandant Hodson's Horse, Lieutenant Colonel MMS Bakshi, was awarded a Mahavir Chakra, and Major Bhupinder Singh, who was a very brave and bold squadron commander of Bravo Squadron, Hodson's Horse, was awarded a Mahavir Chakra posthumously. They did extremely well. There were many more stories to tell you about, but time is short, so I'll call it off here. Jai Hind, and thank you very much for your listening.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I'd like to thank General Shehgil and the organizers of the Chandigarh Military Lit Fest for inviting me on this panel. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to talk about 2 significant issues with regards to the 1965 war. One is about strategic outcomes, and the other one is the role of air power. Now, as a military historian, I'm rather uncomfortable talking about victories and defeats. I would much rather assess war and conflict on a benchmark of outcomes. Larger number of positive outcomes, larger number of negative outcomes, that is the way one learns lessons from wars and conflicts, rather than any chest-thumping narratives of victory or defeat. So let me look at the strategic backdrop, right? What was the scene in and around India before the conflict erupted in September? Number one is that India was in a bit of a political crisis with the death of its first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru. Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri was just settling down in office. President Ayub Khan was an entrenched military dictator in Pakistan, and he thought that it was an opportune moment to test India's strategic resolve after the defeat of 1962. On the operational front, under a dynamic defense minister, Y.B. Chavan, India had been gradually building up its military capability from 1962 onwards. And here again, I think Pakistan saw that this was a window of opportunity before India completed its capability build-up after the 1962 war. So if you look at it, Pakistan's strategic game plan was on song. It was well planned, but where the problem came up was in execution and a certain amount of both strategic and operational overconfidence. The other issue was President Ayub Khan was facing some amount of pressure internally from a young and upcoming politician by the name of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, and he needed to prove his mettle once again at an opportune moment of time to test the Indian resolve in 1965. So that was the strategic backdrop. What about some important operational balancing? Because of India's China contingency, a large quantum of Indian forces were still devoted onto the Eastern Front, including the Indian Air Force, and therefore the balance of forces vis-a-vis Pakistan on the Western Front was almost even. And that was another thing that gave President Ayub Khan some amount of confidence to take on the Indian armed forces, given that there was a notion that there was this misplaced notion still within the Pakistani army that 10 Pakistani soldiers were equal to 1 Indian soldier. Now, these were the series of overconfident strategic posturing that proved to be costly for Pakistan at the end of the day, despite having fought some operational and tactical battles pretty well. So that was as far as the strategic and operational backdrop was concerned. Now let me get down to air power. Look, the Indian Air Force was actually eager to get into battle because it had not got into battle offensively in the 1962 war for inexplicable reasons that are beyond the purview of this particular discussion. But when the Chumb offensive, now look, one always assumes that the Indian Air Force went into battle in September 1965. That's incorrect, because the Indian Air Force went into battle in August also during Operation Gibraltar. What happened was General Harbaksh Singh, very, very innovative, imaginative and assertive Indian Army commander, reached out to the Air Force and said that, look, can you modify your Mi-4 helicopters to carry machine guns? And can you carry my special forces and troops to outflank the Pakistani raiders who were coming in along eight thrust lines in Kashmir. So actually Mi-4s dropped Ghatak platoons and commandos behind enemy lines as they were advancing into Kashmir. And by the end of August, almost 1,500 troops and Razakars of the Pakistani forces were captured, leading to the failure of Op Gibraltar. So Mi-4s of the Indian Air Force played a very, very important role even in Op Gibraltar. Now let's get to Operation Grand Slam, which is the battle for Chumb. Now, both the Indian Army and the Indian Air Force were caught by surprise on the 1st of September. Not only was the Indian Army caught by surprise in Chumb, but the Indian Air Force was caught by surprise by the Pakistan Air Force's preemptive strikes on several Indian Air Force airfields that led to several aircraft being destroyed on the ground. But after that, just as the Indian Army bounced back, I think the Indian Air Force demonstrated tremendous resilience and fighting back capability, because despite losing Vampires to Sabre jets over Chumb, subsequently the amount of attrition that was inflicted by the Indian Air Force during the armored battle actually went a long way in stemming the Pakistani armored offensive. Now, the Indian Air Force's role during the early days of the war was not just to support the army. The Indian Air Force was tasked with extensive interdiction, which means to say, when I talk about interdiction, it means to say attacking enemy forces in depth, attacking railway stations, attacking communication centers. The Indian Air Force was also tasked with putting Pakistani airfields out of action, airfields like Sargodha, Peshawar. Its bomber force with Canberras did some wonderful work. And just to give you an idea, even in terms of equipment, the Indian Air Force was just about building its capability, right? It had Nats, it had Misters, it had Hunters, and it had Canberras. The MiG-21 had just been inducted in 1963. It did not see much action in the 1965 war, but the word has it that the Pakistani squadrons were alerted to the fact that if you know that the MiG-21s are going to be in the air and in the area of operation, don't engage with them, get away. So that was some amount of coercive value that the MiG-21s, but the bulk of the work in 1965 was done by the Hunters, the Nats, the Misters, and the Canberras. Now, the other issue that must be kept in mind is that this was the first time that the Indian Air Force was operating extensively in close air support operations. Now, the Pakistan Air Force, in turn, had trained extensively with the Americans and their Sabre jets, and the procedures that they had evolved were far more sophisticated. So for the Indian Air Force also, the 1965 war was a tremendous learning experience. And if one looks at the number of losses that both sides suffered, leaving aside the number of aircraft that were destroyed on the ground, the number of air-to-air kills achieved by the Indian Air Force with their Nats and Hunter aircraft far exceeded the air-to-air kills that were achieved by the Pakistani Air Force Sabre jets. The other point that must be understood is that the concept of deep strikes actually emerged in the 1965 war. So you used to have Canberras getting airborne from Agra airfield and striking Pakistani airfields and installations as far in depth as Peshawar, more than 400 kilometers one way. So the concept of deep strikes in the Indian Air Force actually emerged in the 1965 war. And like General Grewal mentioned, many tales of individual gallantry. We had the Indian Air Force's first Mahavir Chakra awarded to Squadron Leader Devaya for his attacks on Sargodha airfield and subsequent aerial combat with the Sabre jets. You had the first air-to-air kill achieved by one of the Keeler brothers, Trevor Keeler. You had 23 Squadron of Nats performing brilliantly. You had Hunters performing brilliantly in the 1965 war. So overall, I would say that even though the IAF was on the back foot during the early days of the war, but the resilience and the ability of the IAF to quickly learn on its feet and get up and get into the air and hit the Pakistanis hard is something that characterizes the air war of 1965. Now, I would strongly recommend for those of you who want to read more about the air war in the 1965 war, I have 4 chapters about it in my book, India's Wars, and Jagan Pilarisetti and Samir Chopra have written an exclusive book about the 1965 war, which I would urge you to pick up in case you're interested in knowing more about the Indian Air Force in the 1965 war. So, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for the panelists who gave a very objective assessment of the land operations as well as the air operations. Now we come on to the higher picture. Did Pakistan achieve its aim? What was Pakistan's aim to launch off Gibraltar? Create an uprising in Jammu and Kashmir? Defreeze Kashmir? Force India to the negotiating table and dictate terms on that? Did it happen? Nothing of that sort happened. Defreezing Kashmir? Nothing. India did not go to the negotiating table. Then secondly, of course, Grand Slam has already been highlighted. What was India's higher direction of war? When Pakistan launched its offensive in Akhnur sector, it was based on the premise that India would not react along the international border. The very myth, Pakistan's myth, was broken when 11 and 1 Coast launched an operation across the international border. And they set aside, or rather this was a threat which Prime Minister Nehru had given to Pakistan in 1952, that should you attack Kashmir, we would have the time and place of our own choosing to respond to your threat in Kashmir. It was implemented in letter and spirit when we launched the offensive in Lahore sector as well as Sialkot sector. The operational victories have already been highlighted, and the operational victories, to deduce whether it's a victory or a stalemate, it is not only in terms of the number of tanks decimated or the amount of territory captured, it is also related to the political objectives of both the countries. Pakistan achieved nothing. Well, India emerged stronger from the 1965 war. After the ceasefire, a foreign correspondent, American author and researcher Russell Bryan's right, when the ceasefire was being negotiated on 9th of September, when youth had visited Pakistan as well as India, Pakistan put 3 conditions for the ceasefire. That is withdrawal of Indian forces from Jammu and Kashmir, establishment of a United Nations force, and plebiscite. And what was the ceasefire when it was actually imposed? Ceasefire and withdrawal to the stated patients as on 5th August. India was the first one who accepted, and Pakistan was compelled to accept this thing. They did not rather force their decision to implement, that is, the 3 conditions in the ceasefire. And it's quite strange and ridiculous for Pakistan to claim victory. It is just like what they have happened in Sindhu. What was their claim to victory was that they prevented the Indian army from reaching Lahore. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Lahore was never an objective, neither a political objective nor an Indian army objective to reach Lahore. It was to threaten Lahore by securing the eastern bank of Ichogil Canal. We're covering an area of about 15 to 20 kilometers, right from Dograhi to Barki. We had effectively secured the eastern bank of Ichogil Canal. The rivers were destroyed, the bridges were destroyed, but we were well in a position to go to Lahore should it have been our political objective. It wasn't so. With this, I come to the end of our discussion. Now I leave the House open for the question and answers. Over to the audience now. Yes, please, questions, please.
Hello.
Yes, sir, please.
Sir, firstly, very engrossing commentary on the operation by the panelists. After a long time, one has heard this kind of discussion, and it's very educative. My question is that I believe that in a crude sector, on 2nd September 65, GOC Pak Infantry Division was changed abruptly when he was leading the operations. Firstly, why this change was there and what had the implications? Thank you.
Okay, please take on.
So thank you, sir. So firstly, we have to thank the Pakistanis for doing that. They changed their GOC 12 Infantry Div, that is General Akhtar Malik, on the very second day of the battle, that is 2nd September. Now, why did they change him? Till today, it's not written anywhere in black and white as to why he was changed. However, as far as we can assess, and the certain assessments are, firstly, if we take Ayub Khan, who was that time the president and everything. Now Ayub Khan and Yahya Khan, who was GOC 7 Div, who took over from Akhtar Malik, they were very good friends. And Yahya was known to hit the bottle at times, along with Ayub Khan. The second one was General Musa. General Musa says that it had already been planned that once we reach Munabar Tabi, the command will change and be given to Yahya Khan, that is from 7 Infantry Div. Now the point comes here, this Operation Grand Slam was planned on 15th of May. Now such a thing, when the offensive is going on and you're heading towards Akhnur, there was no need to change the horses en route. And if it was planned, as per what the General Musa says, the point comes up is, why were the people not aware? Maybe Yahya Khan was aware. Now, as far as the junior commanders and even the DMO, the Pakistani DMO was not aware that it is going to be changed. Another theory articulated was, General Musa, when he came down to Kharia, he did not find the GOC there. The GOC in the front. And he could not be briefed properly by the staff officer. So they said that he's out of communication, he's extended this thing. Now, there's another theory that Akhtar Malik was going too fast and they did not want him to go and capture Khanur at that speed because that would have provoked India. The other theory also, that he was going too slow and Yahya had to be brought in. And one more theory was that General Akhtar Malik was a Ahmadiyya. Now Ahmadiyya sect, they are the ones who were declared as non-Muslims in 74. But this is also does not hold gel well because Ayub Khan was never a bigot. And he was a very balanced kind of person as far as religion was concerned.
Should I add further?
One can say very clearly that there was nothing, the only thing which comes up is that it was to basically give glory to Yahya Khan, that you take over the glory. May I continue, sir? General,
let me finish. Let me add on to what Brigadier Satinder has highlighted. When General Yahya Khan took over this division, his brigade commanders also wanted to push it forward, since they had made a reasonable amount of success in Akhnur sector. You know what Yahya said to one of his brigade commanders, if the boy dig in, Chaudhary is no fool, he will counterattack you. So what Satinder said, that perhaps he was going too fast, and Pakistan in all its efforts, they did not want a full-fledged war, and that happened on 3rd September. India's offensive was launched on 6th September. So by 3rd September, they did not know the Indian intentions. Even the higher direction of war was also not released at that point of time. So they were also cautious to curtail the war, to limit the war, and that's why Akhtar Malik wasn't listening to them, because he was achieving success. So that was the reason, to contain the war, to keep the war as limited as possible. That was one of the intentions of that.
Miss. Morning, sir. I'm General Sudhakar. I don't have any question, but if I may take benefit of this opportunity, it's a 1965 war, as I see as a student of military history, is got a lot of things to teach, take home as lessons. One of the lessons I feel that since we have come a long way from 65 to 2025, you see, wherever 9/11 happened, US didn't come to know that the terrorists would be attacking. Likewise, we had Kargil, we had Galwan. Intelligence has been taking a beating, sir. How best can we restructure our organization if our takeaway has to be derived from the 1965 operation, not to be preempted in future? That is one. And second thing I feel is that perhaps Operation Sindoor has given us a little advantage. Second thing is that apart from the military intelligence, do we have the capability, or has Indian Armed Forces or the structure per se, haven't we learned the lesson that time has come, we need to actually develop the capability to prevent enemy from launching from his land, sir? These are the two questions.
I request General Garewal to take on this question in a slightly different context. What is the relevance of what we did in 1965, present day context, in terms of what General Sudhakar has raised, the intelligence part, and what we are now saying, the multi-domain warfare, what is its applicability of the 1965 operations in the present day context? General Garewal.
I think Op Sindoor And in fact, warfare all over the world has highlighted the fact, if at all that needs to be separately highlighted, that everything is changing very rapidly. And what happened yesterday is not what is going to happen tomorrow. We have to adapt to change, and yet there are very important takeaways from the 65 war which are relevant today and will remain relevant in the foreseeable future. Regardless of what technology can or cannot do, in the India-Pakistan context, ladies and gentlemen, terrain will continue to be important. The manner in which our towns and cities and even villages are located so close to the border and so highly developed, we cannot afford to lose territory, nor can he. And therefore, terrain will be important, victory will be measured by the foot, and whatever you do in terms of attrition will be secondary. So I think the highlight of the 65 war also was that you need to strike across the border and capture high-value terrain as speedily as possible. Secondly, technology is impacting warfare. Technology is impacting every aspect of our lives. But what is more important is our ability to absorb technology and exploit it to the hilt. If we are unable to do that, and the Pakistanis in the 65 war were clearly unable to exploit the edge which the Pattons gave to them in terms of tanks, which their aircraft, the Sabres and starfighters gave to them in the air. They were unable to exploit it. So technology is something we have to get used to. We have to anticipate change. We have to absorb change. But our training must be paramount. Without that, nothing matters. I think the third big takeaway from the 65 war is unit cohesiveness and unit strength. Our strength is units, regiments, battalions. We live and die for our regiments and battalions. Nothing should be done to erode unit cohesiveness, unit spirit. That unit ethos, which we are so very proud of, must continue to be the bedrock of what we do. The next point, which has got amply highlighted in Sindhur and in other wars, Ukraine, you name it, is that the line between the combat zone and the rear areas is today virtually non-existent. Every aspect of the nation is part of the combat zone. We have the ability to strike deep, to strike anywhere. He also has this capability. We have to take measures to prevent him from doing so. So there is no clear distinction between combat zones, corps zones, divisions, brigades. Today it's all nation warfare, every aspect. It's not just an army fighting an army or an air force fighting an air force. It's an all nation effort, and the civil administration played such a marvelous role in the 65 war in Punjab. Hats off to them. That is the kind of national cohesion which is required. Another aspect of the 65 war which comes to my mind is that our strength of our nation lies in unity and diversity. You find troops from all parts of the country fighting for a common cause because it is a just cause. And that is something which will stand us in good stead throughout. Intelligence. You know, every war that India has fought, somehow we land up at the end of the war saying int failure. That must end. Today, there are means of collection of intelligence which are far superior to what existed earlier. In the 65 war, we did not even know how many Patton regiments he has. We did not know that he had a 6th Armored Division at all. So that is something horrifying. Today, that's not going to happen. But what is more important today is our ability to collate information and convert it into intelligence which is usable. You know, a small example from the 65 war. Pakistanis actually captured the entire order of one corps when a dispatch rider of Pune horse was killed. Swar Ranjit Singh, I think his name was, on the Samba road. They failed to act upon it. They still did not know where one corps was. So intelligence is important, but our ability to act on intelligence is even more important. Conflict termination. Premature termination of conflict is not a good idea. I believe personally that the 65 war was prematurely terminated. I believe that Sindhur also could have been carried forward to its logical conclusion. Conflict termination must take place after all your aims have been achieved, period. We had the stamina, mental and logistic and military, to pursue the war. I believe we must pursue war to its logical end till conflict termination is achieved. And my very last point on changing nature of warfare and 65 and Sindhur is that victory is a perception of the mind. We have to win the perception battle. Merely fighting on the ground alone is not good enough. We must not only win, we must also be seen to win. And therefore, this debate of whether 65 was a victory or a stalemate and all is merely a reflection of the fact that we did not perhaps do our perception management adequately well. I think these lessons from the 65 war are relevant. Many of them have been highlighted by Sindhur. Why Sindhur? You look around all the conflict in the world today, these lessons emerge. Thank you.
So I'll just have a quick word, 30 seconds. So one of the very significant lessons from the 1965 war is it was a strategic mistake not to employ the Indian Navy. The Indian Navy was ready to fight. It had all the wherewithal to be able to strike Karachi. It had aviation assets, but it was a strategic blunder to keep the Navy on the sidelines. And it is still not, and it was primarily because the political establishment didn't understand the nature of maritime warfare. The second important lesson is that we really were very, very fledgling in our ability to understand the importance of joint operations. Look, the Cham offensive started in the hours of the dark at about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. There was no reason why the Indian Air Force could not have been called over the battlefield at first light, at dawn. But the Indian Air Force arrived over the tactical battle area only at 5 p.m. What on earth was the Army Chief and the Air Force Chief doing, discussing with the Defense Minister? Does it take so long for air power to come over the tactical battle area? So it's a lack of understanding on the part of I would say the Indian Army at that particular time as to why they did not requisition air power first thing at dawn. And thereafter, to suggest that the Indian Air Force was going to be employed in 1965 only for close air support operations is a lack of understanding of air power. Because ultimately, as the war panned out, the Air Force was employed extensively in most other missions, which is interdiction, which is counter-air, which is deep strike. So I think the early lessons of joint operations were learnt in 1965, and I hope we've moved forward significantly from that point of view, which I think we have. Thank you.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of the first session, and to honor the panelists, may I now request our chairman, Lieutenant General Shergill, to kindly come up and give them the MLF mementos. Humble request to the subsequent panelists, we'll try and stick to the stipulated timing and try and finish on schedule. Can we have the mementos, please? Ladies and gentlemen, let's have a big round of applause for the wonderful 1965 session. Thank you, sir. I hand you over to Parneet to take you for the second session of the morning. Thank you.
Check. Thank you, Ashish. And on a lighter note, taking a cue from the last session, we finally decided to bring the Navy in. The next topic for the panel discussion is continental to maritime power. Is India ready for the Blue Water Challenge? We have the moderator, Admiral Arun Prakash, the panelists, Dr. Vijay Sakhuja, and Major Muhammad Ali Shah. May I request you to please come up on stage while I make the introductions. The moderator, Admiral Arun Prakash, PVSM, AVSM, Veer Chakra, VSM, a retired naval officer, Gallantry Award recipient, and one of India's most decorated and strategic naval leaders. Admiral Arun Prakash served 4 decades in the Indian Navy, culminating as Chief of the Naval Staff and Chairman of the Chief of Staff Committee. During his service, he commanded warships, an aircraft carrier, naval squadrons, the elite fleet, the elite Eastern Fleet, and the Western Naval Command, even being the Commander-in-Chief of India's Tri-Services Andaman and Nicobar Command. A graduate of the Indian Air Force Test Pilot School, DSSC, and the US Naval War College, he has since guided policy and thought leadership in maritime strategy, defense, reform, and national security. Please join me in welcoming Admiral Arun Prakash. Our panelists, Dr. Vijay Sakhuja, Professor and Head of the Center of Excellence for Geopolitical and International Studies at Reva University, Bangalore, that's REVA University, and former senior naval officer with over 26 years service. He has led the National Maritime Foundation, served as a strategist and academic across premier institutions, and authored more than 40 books on maritime strategy, the blue economy, and emerging technologies in naval operations. Today, he brings deep operational experience, scholarly rigor, and strategic foresight to our discussion on the evolving geo-maritime landscapes. Welcome, Dr. Sakhuja. Our next guest, Major Muhammad Ali Shah, a former commissioned officer of the Indian Army, a graduate of OTA Chennai, and veteran of challenging operational postings in Jammu and Kashmir and the Northeast. After his army service, he embraced business leadership roles, then pivoted into the arts as a successful actor and international motivational speaker. Today, he harnesses his rich experience in defense, corporate, and creative domains to inspire people in performance, resilience, and reinvention. Welcome all of you. And before we begin, we have a hard stop at 12:40, with respect to Admiral Arun Prakash's request. So since you are the moderator, Admiral Arun Prakash, you can take it on from here. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Our young audience seem to have deserted us at this particular moment. I wonder if the Navy is being sabotaged by the Air Force and the Army. In the last couple of days, yesterday and today, we visited various domains, the terrestrial, the air domain, cyber, space, and so on. So I think that's a welcome move by the organizers to invite the maritime domain here. For many years, decision makers in Delhi were charged by the Navy as suffering from sea blindness. It was a pejorative term. And it arose from the fact not only that the Indian Navy used to receive a minuscule share of the defense budget, but also by the fact that there was a lack of, at least we felt in the Navy, there was a lack of comprehension of maritime issues amongst the decision makers. Fortunately, things seem to be changing, and one can see a glimmer of what may be called maritime awakening amongst our decision makers. And this awakening, if there is one, is being heralded by the Prime Minister, Mr. Modi. About 10 years ago, he announced an initiative called Sagar's safety and growth for all in the region, in the Indian Ocean, which has been now upgraded to Mahasagar. Last week he was present at a seminar in Bombay, India Maritime Week 2025, and then he went on to announce that 2026 will be an ASEAN-India Year of Maritime Cooperation. So things are looking up. So I congratulate the organizers for having inserted this 60-minute slot for maritime issues. The two panelists have been challenged to answer the crucial question, continental to maritime power, and is India ready for the Blue Water Challenge? Now, I don't intend to tread on the toes of our panelists, but I'll just touch upon two issues which I think need to be drawn to your attention. Firstly, the theme of this session, continental to maritime power, seems to convey that India is waking up from being a continental power and is trying to become a maritime power. That's not true. Both historically and geographically, India has been a continental power and a maritime power, well, from time to time. And I will just briefly dwell on both issues. Why was it a continental power? Well, the Indo-Gangetic Plain is possibly one of the most fertile and richest pieces of territory, much coveted by our neighbors, and therefore we saw a series of invasions, starting from the Battle of Jhelum against the Greeks, then serial battles of Panipat against the Mughals, the Afghans, and so on. So that heartland of India has seen competition for power. The longer lasting empires, the Mauryas, the Guptas, the Mughals, were all centered there. They earned their subsistence from gathering revenues and taxes and so on. So there is a good reason why Indians have focused themselves internally and thought of themselves as a continental power. But that's not the complete story. If you look seawards, there is good reason why India is actually a maritime power, because the Indian peninsula sticks out 900 kilometers into the sea. It's flanked by the Arabian Sea on one side, the Bay of Bengal on the other. There's an 11,000 kilometer long coastline plus islands and so on, which provided fertile ground for foreign trade and so on centuries ago. Then of course nature has endowed us with a great boon, which is the monsoon winds. Half the year the winds blow from southwest, ideal for sailing ships to come from Africa, Middle East, this way. The rest of the year they blow from northeast. So again, ideal for these ships to return home. So both on the eastern side, Southeast Asia, and on the west, there has been intense trade led by intrepid Indian sailors who took religious teachers, artisans, trade across both sides. So India does have good geographic reasons to call itself a maritime. Then of course looking at various dynasties, if you go far back, starting with the Satavahanas, the Cheras on the west coast, and indeed the Cholas in southern India. The Cholas were a great maritime power. We've forgotten them. We are focusing too much on the Marathas. The Chola, Emperor Rajendra Chola created a massive fleet, naval fleet. He went and attacked another empire, the Srivijaya Empire, which is now part of Indonesia, decimated them and ruled and dominated Malacca Straits and that part of the seas. Unfortunately, with the decline of the Cholas, India's sea power also declined. And in 1498, when Vasco da Gama made an appearance off Calicut, there was no Indian ruler or Raja or king who had a significant navy to oppose them. Consequently, the Europeans came and prevailed. The point to note here is that the invaders who came over the passes, mountain passes into India, the Afghans, the Mughals, the Mongols, the Turks, the Persians, fought here, but then those who remained were assimilated by the Indian civilization and culture and became Indians. And one of our panelists is witness. He's a descendant of Afghan royalty whose ancestors came and settled in India. But those who came by sea, that is the Europeans, the Dutch, the French, the Portuguese, the British, they came here to exploit and plunder our land and enslave the citizens and take it all away. So that's the difference, and that's why we must be more alert about our sea maritime security. Now, after the 18th century, after the decline of the Marathas, there were flashes of brilliance. There was the Zamarin of Calicut, there was the Marakar, Kunjali Marakars, there was Hyder Ali, Tipu Sultan, the Maratha Admiral Kanoji Angre. They all created small naval forces, and they did put up a fight against the Europeans. But by the 18th century, all this had declined, and that is the commencement of malaise of sea blindness. The British ensured that we had nothing of like a navy. We had a vast Indian army of Hindustan, which was used to be deployed all over the world, but no navy was created. So that's the point number one, that we are not becoming a maritime power. We were a maritime power, we forgot about it, and now this is a revival or a renaissance. The second point is that we don't understand the full implications of maritime power. We speak about it lightly. Now, just because we have a competent, robust, technologically advanced navy does not mean that we are a maritime power. A navy is only a small component of a nation's maritime power. And we've neglected that, we've overlooked it. And there's no better example to show our lapses than to look at our neighbor China. About 2 decades ago, the Chinese Communist Party decided that, they must have decided earlier, but they declared that China is going to be a world power, maybe number one by 2049. But they also realized somewhere down the line that before a prerequisite for claiming the status of world power, you have to be a maritime power. They were quite clear about it. So they set about becoming a maritime power in a very methodical and deliberate way. And therefore today, amongst the world's best 10 ports, 7 are Chinese. The Chinese shipbuilding industry is number one in the world without any questions. The Chinese Navy outnumbers the US Navy. China has 5,000 merchant ships out at sea. No other nations fly that kind of flag. The Chinese Coast Guard is the biggest in the world. The Chinese fishing fleet is massive. They plunder all our proteins from our waters and take them home. China leads the world in deep sea exploration. Unfortunately, in all these indices, we lag behind. Our ports are languishing. Our shipbuilding industry, except for warship building, is again moribund. Merchant fleet is very small. So until and unless we realize that these are the components of maritime power, I think we can delay this declaration that India is becoming a maritime power. Finally, yesterday mention was made about two-front war, two and a half front war. Who knows what the future has in store? But in my own perception, if there is a two-front war or a 2.5 front war, which means a nexus between China and Pakistan, then the best that our gallant army and very capable air force can do is to hold them there, create a stalemate. I doubt if we can go anything beyond that. But if we look seaward, we have a tremendous advantage over both our adversaries. We dominate the Indian Ocean, we have a capable navy, and we can certainly do harm, threaten anybody who starts a conflict with us in the waters of the Indian Ocean. We have the capacity to do that, provided we address all components of maritime power and become truly a maritime power, not just declaring or issuing slogans and all. So with that introduction, I hope the two panelists will address some of these issues. Otherwise, we can take it up with the audience. Let me invite Dr. Sakhuja to say his piece.
Well, thank you, Chairman. Sure, sir. I'll take about 15 minutes. Let me try and compress it as much as I can, although seas are vast. At the outset, let me thank the organizers for this wonderful opportunity to participate in the Lit Fest. And in its truest sense, it's more an exposition of what all research has been done or would be done that is put out into the public domain. Of course, books are a valuable source, but at the same time, this narrative, this exchange, these conversations make a lot of sense. And it's in this context, I'm going to draw liberally from what Admiral said just now about history. And that's where some of the shreds I'll take on, rather the threads rather, sir, from there and then try to build it up. For me, when I look at continental and maritime power, I think the narrative on being continental or maritime is rather skewed. The narrative, the discourse, it's somehow been built by a certain constituency, and terms such as maritime blindness, sea blindness have emerged. As a matter of fact, for me, it's maritime awakening, and I'll argue that all along. A bit from the history. 1,000 years ago, this is just in the month of July this year, our Prime Minister was there in Tamil Nadu, and he Gangai Konda Cholapuram temple in Tiruchirappalli to mark 1,000 years of Rajendra Chola. Historic maritime expedition to Southeast Asia. We do claim at times in terms of that this country has not gone in an external expedition. Well, we have a living example, we got an example over here. What did he say at the end of it? He talked about the Cholas, glorifying, of course, the Navy has chosen the Marathas as the lead in terms of coming out of the colonial mindset, the colonial maritime mindset. But then this is what the Cholas did, renaming the Port Blair into Sri Vijayapuram. A series of this have emerged in the discourses since July. That means bringing the Cholas up front. And then if you look at the bottom row towards the end, release commemorative coin marking military expedition or millenary of Rajendra Chola's naval expedition. So expedition has been part of the maritime tradition, or for that matter, maritime thinking or the naval thinking since ancient times, that is 1,000 years. So what did the Cholas do? They went in for an attack. Why did they attack? We are still stuck as historians or as students of history trying to figure out what was the reason, the rationale for this attack. But there are multiple reasons. Historians are of the belief that there was an attack and it did take place. The reasons are plenty. Till such time we get an authentic and confirmed kind of an evidence to say that this expedition did not take place, we are to believe that this expedition did happen. They went on to attack. And look at the kind of 10 places that they went and attacked over there. Now you can imagine going 200, 400 nautical miles away from the Tamil Nadu coast, going to Southeast Asia, towards Indonesia, the archipelago, coming up the Straits of Malacca. I think it would have required a massive fleet. It would have required a number of ships. And if that was the idea about it, that means there was a tremendous maritime power or maritime understanding or maritime capability or capacity of the Cholas of that time. So there was nothing called as maritime blindness. To my mind, as a student of international relations and all matters maritime, it is only continuity and change. And what do we see in the 21st century? Our leaders say strength and power through innovation and indigenization, because we are into the domain called as Industry 4.0. We are wearing technologies. We are eating technologies. It is embedded into us. And it is very right for him. He is talking about self-reliance and technological advancement within the Navy. Keyword is technological advance, and I'll argue that. Maritime preparedness is no longer only about ships and submarines. It is based on technology-driven, network-centric, and autonomous systems. Navy has traditionally been, as a matter of fact, technologically advanced. This is purely out of evidence. You look at the warfare, the way it has been conducted, or its origins of warfare, the platform that is. We started with the oars, we come down to sails, we come to battleships, we come down to helicopters here, and last, if you see bottom row towards the right, you see an Otis platform which does on regular basis voyages from the Americas to Guam. This is the kind of autonomous nature of warfare which is evolving. So we move from telescopes to binoculars, and this is Lord Nelson's kind of a, let's say, operations board, where he's, as a matter of fact, talking about how he's going to conduct operations. There we have augmented reality enabled 3D commander's table. We are talking about a war room of this kind, and there we have a artificial intelligence enabled or Industry 4.0 enabled captain. This is not just thinking, it is a reality, ladies and gentlemen. This is the technology we are moving in, and this is how globally the navies are taking shape. So what's happening? We began with ships 1.0, wooden, 2.0, iron hull, steam power, 3.0, diesel power, 4.0, we're into auto. We are right now into auto, 4.0 ships of this kind, both commercial and warships. We're talking about ships 5.0, 6.0, 7.0. These are not just to be thought about, they are going to be a reality. So we are talking about digital twinning. I can sit ashore and look at any platform, what is its condition, both machinery, hull, etc., human, partially manned, etc., etc. So even fuel is moving. We all started with sails, went to coal, went to oil. Right now we are in oil. We are moving into LNG. We are talking about hydrogen. We are moving into now biofuels. And finally we are coming back to wind. Wind enabled with 4IR technology. The sails, which are smart sails. We are going to be looking at the wind, which way it comes to maximize this whole natural power of wind. That's the transformation that is happening in the naval world. So, two trends come out very, very clearly. One, artificial intelligence has made its debut into the naval domain. We are into what we call informatize. That means we were talking about information. We are moving into intelligentized warfare. That is the future, how it will shape up. Sense of urgency, everybody is in a hurry, it wants to get AI, etc., etc. I'll talk about that a little later. Across the globe, across the navies, there is the urgency which is going on. We need smarter, and the smartest weapon systems. We need smart propulsion systems. We need smart platforms in which we go autonomous. But how far you want to leave them to be autonomous, I'll again argue about that. So United States Navy has stood up Task Force 59. It's in our neighborhood. As a matter of fact, it's an opportunity for us in India, as part of the India-US cooperation, to be part of it, engage with them. As a matter of fact, more navies can join into this whole activity, led by US Task Force 59. So it's already on its way. Competition is mired in geopolitical and geostrategic competition. As a matter of fact, at my university, we teach a course on generative geopolitics. That is the future, how geopolitics are going to drive certain large language models, etc., quantum, AI, etc., which we hear in the market, or we wear ourselves, our smartphones, whether it is Pro, the new phone which has come from Apple. So this is all there. And as a matter of fact, if you see, an Apple itself is already on board. The concept of sea power, I'm sure several of us, as a matter of fact, several of us have been talking about Mahan. Mahan was a product of the first industrial revolution. Ladies and gentlemen, we are into fourth industrial revolution. We're going to get into the fifth industrial revolution. Is Mahan relevant? Is it going to be a new Mahan that we're going to be talking about? Will 21st century be led by IR Industry 5.0 technologies? These are some of the questions that we'll have to talk about. This is where the future research will have to be taking place. Naval singularity. Ladies and gentlemen, this is my biggest worry. As an analyst, as a scholar, as a student of international relations, this is my worry, when super intelligent artificial intelligence can be expected to lead us. We see robots. As a matter of fact, we enjoy the services rendered by robots. Will the robots be overpowering us? Is this point, and this point is going to be coming very soon. It's not very far. I'm not talking about 2 decades or 3 decades. Ladies and gentlemen, we are heading towards that point with the green, the blue, the red line cut across. That is 2035. Machine will be smarter than you. It'll do all the jobs. We'll feel happy. Maybe we thought we'll get more time to be creative for leisure. But I guess that's a dangerous point, because today we already see, when you ask a student, okay, give me an essay, rushes down, goes to ChatGPT. In less than 24 hours, you get a fantastic, as a matter of fact, essay comes out, and you feel that, what is it? I've not been a good student myself. Look at the way he's arguing. So we are running to that, and we are surrendering ourselves. And at this point, when we talk about warfare, are we going to surrender to that cross-junction? We'll have to pull it back. That is where we'll have to keep the men or the man behind the machine over there. Humans will have to be not only for the purpose of conduct of operations, but for the purpose of controlling it. I think my discourse suggests that control the AI. Don't let it take away. It's a useful tool. Don't depend on it so much, but maximize it purely as a tool. So, our chief the other day said, I'm going to be talking about 200 warship Navy. I think brilliant, ambitious though. It's not easy to build ship. Of course, I would say, Admiral said just now, in the Chinese, they've been building a large fleet. They are already overtaken the United States Navy in terms of innovation. And there's plenty. I think you sense it when you're in Bengaluru. You sense that innovation happening all around you. So fostering a tech of infusion, contributing to Atmanirbhar, Viksit Bharat, and of course in-house high-end development, this is what is happening as far as the Navy is concerned. So there is a big word these days, maritime. It's a slogan, it's a mantra which is on Maritime Amrit Kaal. Sir, I'm just 2 minutes away, sir. Vision 2047, Admiral said, Navy is not maritime power. Maritime power is a larger whole in which you have shipping, shipbuilding, ports, infrastructure, human resource, trained, skilled human resource. All these encompass and build into what we would call as a maritime power. There's this Amrit Kaal. We are trying to build merchant vessels or ice-class vessels, which should be put into operations in the Arctic, the North Pole. We are talking about such a kind of investment which is coming in as far as shipbuilding is concerned. So these are all good stories and working towards Amrit Kaal. There is also a naval Amrit Kaal. Ladies and gentlemen, we overall, when we grew up, we were trained, we were told. Yeah. So whoever controls the seas rules the world. Then we got to hear about whoever controls the skies rules the world. I think, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to say those who rule chips and data will rule the entire world. That's the future, at least till 2035, 2045. Strategic thinking and tactical planning for autonomous intelligence warfare. What we need is, in this country, a disruption, more precisely, naval disruption. Thinking, building, informatize, intelligentize, that's the future, what it's going to be. But we must also remain conscious of the fact that what AI can do, and the word of caution is how much it must do. We tend to forget empathy, we tend to forget conscience, we tend to forget society. We don't want to kill. And that's where it all comes in. Will we allow the robots or the naval platform to destroy humanity? I'll stop at that. Thank you very much for your attention.
Major Shah, it's your turn.
Thank you, everyone. Admiral Arun Prakash, sir. Sakhuja, sir. Admiral Shergill, sir. General Shergill, sir. So sorry. Too much of Navy in my head, since I've been... That's where. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to be here. Thank you very much. I would like to begin by joining the dots what Mr. Sakhuja said just now about artificial intelligence. I personally feel the two important challenges that the world is facing today are not what Russia and Ukraine are doing in the sea over there, but artificial intelligence and natural stupidity. If you rely on the number one, we'll become more and more stupid. But anyhow, but we have to accept the fact that artificial intelligence is the new today. When we talk about change in mindset from continental to marine power, and when we talk about the blue waters, the blue water navy, for the benefit of our friends who are not from the forge, because all of you are stalwarts over here, you all know about whatever I'm going to be speaking right now. So for the benefit of those like you, young man, for those who do not know, I would like to connect with each one of you. And I would like to say that before entering the sea, because I'll be entering the sea now, a river trembles with fear. This is by Khalil Gibran. In the Prophet he had said that. Before entering the sea, a river trembles with fear. She looks back at the path she has traveled across the peaks of the mountains, the long winding roads crossing forests and villages. And in front of it, she sees an ocean so vast that to enter seems nothing more but to disappear forever. But there is no other way. The river cannot go back. Nobody can go back. To go back is impossible in existence. The river now has to take the risk of entering the ocean, because it is now that fear will disappear and the river will know it's not about disappearing into the ocean, but of becoming the ocean. So blue waters, what do we understand by the blue water navy? A navy which can operate comfortably beyond its comfort zone, beyond its reaches, beyond its own territorial waters, which can sail through effortlessly. So here I think this itself that a former army officer is speaking on a subject pertaining to the Navy itself is a blue water challenge for me, sir. When you were entering, the gentleman, towards your left, you saw the Sukna Lake. And if you observed, the Sukna Lake appeared brownish in color, little muddy in color. That is the coast near our homeland, the brown water Navy, which is very close to us. Are you following, young man? For you, I'm saying. Because over here, everyone is still what? I don't want to speak in front of them. Are you getting me? And a blue water Navy is beyond our shores. So if you ask me, I perceive 5 nations which are actually prepared, which I can call as a blue water Navy, which are China, America, France, UK, and Russia. When I was in the army, I was asked every time, by my commanding officer, are you ready? And the straightaway impromptu reply was, yes, sir. Isn't that what we all do in the army? तैयार हैं? Yes, sir. खाना खाया? We may not have eaten. हाँ साहब, खाया. Are we prepared for the blue water challenge? That's a question which we can very easily say, yes, we are prepared. Yes, sir. 3 bags full, sir. But are we actually prepared? Frankly, I would say we are partially prepared. We are not yet fully prepared. And how would we actually be called a blue water Navy is, I see a few points. First is, of course, use more and more technology, which we are doing. We have the IMAC. And to monitor where our vessels are right now, 50 ports are connected, 150 ship Navy. We are on towards making a 200 ship Navy. We have 2 aircraft carrier at the moment, INS Majithia and INS Vikrant. So we have to actually indigenize, make in India. We have to be self-reliant. Second, we have to attract young, fresh talent, just like yours in the Navy. It's a compliment to you. Our country needs young men like you, by the way. What's your name? Thank you. So, attracting young talent in the Navy. I have seen a lot of advertisements for the army. Do you have it in you? Join the Indian Army. Be an officer for 5 years. Be a gentleman for life. Now it's 10 years now. In my time it was 5 years. But I haven't seen very many advertisements about the Navy not because of any other reason. But I feel I have seen films on the army. Lakshya, LOC, Kargil, so many. They're very rarely I've seen in the media Navy being talked about. But let me tell you, Navy plays a crucial role. I would like to quote Ottoman Admiral Haywire Barbosa. He mentioned, as you said, sir, so, who rules the sea will rule the land. And it is, well, as sir said, who rules the sky will rule the world. Who rules the chips will rule the world, actually. But it's a fact. As Admiral Arun Prakash rightly said, that my ancestors, they had come by sea to India and they settled here. And since then, India has been our homeland. So, marine power is something which we had neglected, we had underestimated perhaps. On 4 December 1971, the Indian Navy bombarded the port of Karachi. During Op Sindoor, there was a lot of information warfare being spread from both sides, but mainly from the Pakistan side. And there was a lot of rumor mongering that they have captured this, we have captured that, and so on and so forth. But the fact is, the Navy, the waters play a very, very crucial role in terms of diplomacy, military, in terms of trade, in terms of projection of power, in terms of everywhere. So that is our strength, in fact, and history has proved time and again that no operation is won single-handedly, either by the Army or by the Navy or by the Air Force alone. It's won together when we work in synergy. We have Op Trishul going on right now. Op Trishul. That's a very lethal weapon of 3 Army, Navy, Air Force combined together. The Ran of Kutch, Rajasthan Desert, all have been on high alert. The civil aviation has been alerted. And that is when we work in synergy and when we give equal importance to all 3 services, we will know that India today is on the verge of becoming a superpower. It actually is. There was a time when I was taken captive by insurgents in the northeast. It's a very different story altogether. But one truth that stood on at that time, when I was in the captivity of the undergrounds, was India is definitely worth every risk, every sacrifice. And our brave soldiers, our brave sailors, our brave airmen they are the epitome of that. On 26th November 2008, unfortunately, India bled. And we saw terrorists coming from across the border, coming in small boats. In Bombay, the Taj Palace was bombed. There was fighting over there. The CSE station was, again, the Leopold Cafe, where I've had several occasions of going there to have coffee. That was fired upon. And we saw everything going helter-skelter. Where did we falter? Was it that our Marine Police, our Coast Guard, or Navy wasn't alert? They were. They definitely were. 100% they were. But yet, the terrorists took advantage of the loopholes and they sneaked into India being totally undetected. We have to ensure that such a thing doesn't happen ever again. And thirdly, I would like to say, when we talk about diplomacy, I think we should also concentrate on building our ties with nations such as Indonesia, Oman, Seychelles, so that when our ships go on long voyages, though, of course, Navy, as I mentioned to you, teaches you diplomacy, unlike Army or Air Force. There you have our vessels can rest and recoup. They can have refueling done. I'll give you a small example and I'll conclude by that, sir. When I was coming from Delhi to Chandigarh, I sent my live location on my family group that this is where the cab driver is taking me. So my brothers, sisters, my wife, my parents, my son could all monitor my movement. Similarly today, exactly the same way, we have technology to detect where our vessels are. And I think the way forward is to be secular in terms of the arms and services. Army, Navy, Air Force, I think all are great. And once again, thank you very much. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Ali. Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, you heard our 2 panelists sharing their thoughts with us. I must commend the audacity of young Major Shah to embark on a critique of maritime power. Dr. Sakhuja made the point, he asked the question whether Mahan is relevant or not. Now, Mahan was a proponent of big navies, big battleships, powerful ships. A cataclysmic clash at sea would decide the fate of nations and so on. Of course, all in support of trade. So today we've got to think long and hard whether there will be battles at sea, how vulnerable are ships today at sea. You have a country like Ukraine, which has no navy to speak of, but they've chased out the Black Sea Fleet from the waters around them. Similarly, drones, unmanned vehicles, etc., beyond visual range combat is now the order of the day. So we've got to think hard whether Mahan is relevant or not. I think his relevance is rapidly decreasing. Major Shah spoke about blue water navies. Now contemplate that the Chinese have maintained a standing patrol in the Gulf of Aden, Horn of Africa, for the last 15 years. The nearest Chinese naval base is in Hainan, about 8,000 to 9,000 kilometers. So they've maintained a standing patrol for many years now. Of course, Djibouti, their naval base, has come up recently. But think hard, is China a blue water navy or not? I would certainly say so. And on an increasing basis, we see their submarines, their research ships frequenting our waters. So I think that is the adversary that we need to match up to. So these are a couple of thoughts that came to my mind, but if the audience has any issues to discuss, please feel free to ask any of the panelists or myself. Yes, sir.
Sir, I'm Jan Lahuja, and my question is related to the title of the session that we had. Is India ready for the maritime challenge? And more applicable when you sit in Chandigarh and Punjab, where more than anybody else we have a continental mindset. So you very well brought out that we have a rich maritime history, and if I narrow the scope of maritime to bring it to the forces, our navy is most advanced technologically, indigenization wise. I mean, out of all the services, I would rate it the most advanced service, and I'm from Army. So the question today is that we've had a continental mindset. Somehow post Balakot and particularly post Sindoor, air has also come onto the center stage to a large extent. Now, what would it take to bring the maritime power, or in a narrower sense, the navy, to the center of this nation's consciousness? Because we understand trade is important, economy is important, we have to do these things, and definitely navy plays a very important role. But for somebody who's stretched with scarce resources, making the capabilities, they say, acha, navy, now they have sailed out on the sea now. Asli kya hoga? I mean, all I'm asking is a brute question. What would it take in this country to turn the mindset from continental to a maritime domain, sir?
I think you're being very polite and not asking what did the navy do during Sindoor. Is that right?
No.
Well,
No,
let me just point out two things. One is that employment of the navy is a political decision, because the navy operates on the high seas, and once you involve the navy in any conflict, then the implications are fairly widespread. I presume that the government possibly had that in mind, but as you know, the navy was poised. And let me tell you one more thing, that the class submarine of the Indian Navy carries a missile with a range of 300 kilometers, which can be launched from underwater. So if any Indian submarine were to be ordered to launch an attack on any target, nobody would know where the missile came from, because he's going to launch it from underwater. So the capabilities there, BrahMos, ships are equipped with BrahMos. You spoke of air power, but air power is a component of maritime power. Our aircraft carriers and ships carry aviation elements. So the maritime power is there, but it needs imagination. It possibly needs political courage for the political master to go ahead and employ maritime power. So possibly in the next conflict, they tell me that the Navy was almost poised to go into action. Perhaps in the next such operation, the Navy might come into action.
Thank you, and I'm glad, maybe if I was to vote, I'll get you as the defense minister. Can you hear? Okay, so let me repeat what I said. As General, I would love to have you as my defense minister, so more resources are allocated to me. As a matter of fact, the Navy is concerned. You have been very kind. But there is also, of course, when we are talking about matters maritime and naval, here there is also a factor called deterrence, conventional deterrence. Of course, there is also the nuclear deterrence, which also plays an important role. I think sometimes the leadership may be a little more conservative in terms of not expanding the conflict, in terms of geography or in terms of scope. So here, again, there will be what we saw in Sindoor, what we could gather from the open sources, a large naval force had been lined up with as many as about 65 of them had been loaded with conventional missiles, land attack capability. I think that was sufficient enough for that. And again, it's a political, as it will said, it's again a political decision. But very much, Navy has an important role to play. We'll leave it at that.
Yes, sir.
Sir, my name is Brigadier Harendra Singh, Armored Corps. Some time back, there was a triage that was submarines, the surface ships, and the aircraft. Of course, now a fourth dimension has been added, that is the space. Among all these, among rather the first three, what would the priority be in future or recommended? Because a lot of people are saying that like the tank is dead, the aircraft carrier is dead, being a large, huge asset, and a lot of ships protecting it. Or some say, naval people say vice versa. The aircraft carrier is actually protecting the fleet, whatever you may say. But in this three arms that we have, where would the priority be in the future?
Okay, thank you for that question. This is an issue that should not be decided by admirals and air marshals. This is a question which is taken at the highest level of the government. And it emanates from the role that India sees for itself. Is it going to be a regional power? Is it going to be a world power? We have also claimed to be, what is it called? What's that term? Providers of net security in the region. So India. So keeping these roles in the background, you have to take a decision whether CARE's defense budget, is it better spent on acquiring an aircraft carrier? Better spent on acquiring more nuclear submarines? Attack, there's a division between attack submarines and ballistic missile submarines. So each has a different role to play, and it is not either or. An aircraft carrier has a different role to play. It your presence, if you want to influence friends, threaten enemies, you need an aircraft carrier because 1,000 or 1,500 miles away from home, you can project power. A submarine, by virtue of its role, is invisible. It is submerged. So there are limitations to how much a submarine can do, in roles other than kinetic roles. Yeah, in war, if war breaks out, yes, a submarine has plenty to do. But in peacetime, a submerged submarine has very little role to play. An aircraft carrier is an imposing presence. It shows you, Americans say, an aircraft carrier is 500 acres of American territory floating at your doorstep. So these are decisions that should be insulated from parochial service-related issues, whether submarines or carrier, whether carriers or air force squadrons or tanks. These should emanate from a security doctrine, which will tell us which India wants to play, and then you can design your navy accordingly.
I think at the bottom of it lies the fact and understanding of a balanced fleet. And that's how large navies are built around, where you want to put your resources first in terms of surface or subsurface or in space. For us, as I see it, as a student of maritime affairs, a sea-space-shore continuum, it's not that just the land is to be left. There is a littoral space along the coast, which also must be taken into our consideration. So here is sea, space, shore continuum in which you will develop a balanced fleet which will look after threats that are coming from underwater or from the space or from the shore or land attack from the land that will come by. And let me also add the cyber part of it. So we are talking about 3 S and a C, where this whole entire gamut of building a balanced fleet will come into operations. Thank you.
I just want to add a bit to that. So like China has built ports in Gwadar, in Hambantota, and now as the Admiral said in Djibouti, it's quite recent. Similarly, India's interest also should be much beyond our shores. And I think certainly we have interest in that. There are 50 ports right now which are connected very well regarding communication, regarding tracking. Thank you, sir.
Jain sir, my question is related to Op Sindoor, which you just asked. So sir, about Op Sindoor, being in north part of India, we have very well observed the air power and other activities over here. And it was felt like this, we were part of that, seeing drones and air power and all that. Would you like to throw some light on our water borders, what happened that side, or what was how it was China and Turkey, which were part of the air power and other activities over this side of the borders, what they have, how they have contributed that side, and how they can contribute that side itself. Thank you.
Okay, there are some fundamental differences in the approach of India to maritime power, maritime domain, and Pakistan. Pakistan, obviously being a smaller country with a smaller coast than ours, focuses on what is called sea denial. They want to deny the ability to dominate the seas. India, on the other hand, would like to. India has vast interest. For your knowledge, 40% of GDP comes from exports and imports, and 90% of foreign trade is by sea. Our energy comes by sea. Our trade is dependent on sea lanes, etc. So it is in the vital interest of the nation to protect the sea lanes, its interest at sea. So India aspires to dominate the seas in its own interest. Pakistan Navy is crafted to deny India that ability. So Pakistan has focused right from the beginning. They acquired a submarine much before us, almost a decade before us, and they've built up a very capable submarine force. Their navy has got a aviation wing which carries anti-ship missiles, etc. So their role, a smaller navy with limited economy to back it up, is a sea denial role. And as you mentioned, obviously they've also got their share of drones and unmanned vehicles from Turkey, etc. In this particular last Operation Sindoor, it lasted only for a few hours or 4 days or whatever you call it, but had it lasted longer, the Indian Navy's presence off the small coast of Pakistan, which has only 2 ports to speak of, would have had an impact, because it was virtually a blockade. We would not have allowed, if the government permitting, we would not have allowed any ships to enter or exit from Pakistani ports. And given a few days, this would have had a telling effect on Pakistan's war-making ability if you are cut off from fuel, ammunition, etc. So that is the long-term impact of a naval presence or naval blockade. Perhaps the last question there.
Sir, I am Colonel Gurvinder, sir. Sir, recently American fleet in East China Sea lost 2 aircrafts in a day. And that was due to deception by the Chinese, maybe alleged EW interference from the Sparta Islands or other places. Do we have such capability with us, or we are preparing for that? Thank you.
Can you just repeat your first part of your question?
Sir, recently, couple of days back, American fleet, their 2 aircrafts had gone down in East China Sea. One was a Seahawk and one was a F-22 Raptor. So it was allegedly basically the Chinese interference with the EW or some setups at those islands. Do we have such capability, or we are preparing for such things in India? Thank you.
Okay, it wasn't a Raptor. I think it was an F-35B from an aircraft carrier plus a helicopter. Yes, it's possible. The F-35 is highly dependent on software, etc., and it is possible that somebody can intervene. I don't think we've reached that stage of capability where we can, interfere with an aircraft's flight control systems and bring it down. Perhaps our people are working on it. Thank you. You want to say something?
Yeah, I think, of course, I will not comment on the incident what you talked about, but we also notice a trend in use of lasers by the Chinese Navy, and this is going to be a problematic issue. How do we create in terms of, let's say, counter laser activity or kind of a blinding or a shield of sorts? This will be another challenge for us. While we talk about IT and etc., the laser challenge is there with you, and it has been put to good use. I really have no idea if Indian Navy is thinking about bringing in about lasers on board it. So of course, the US Navy has developed, the Chinese have developed. We have good pictures available now in the public domain where they are going to be putting it out, and they've used it on low-end platforms like fishermen and fishing fleets, etc. So that is another challenge for us in the maritime domain.
We have developed a small directed energy weapon, which is a powerful laser, but it has to be scaled up to be used as a weapon system.
Ali, would you like to say anything?
So I think the Quad will play a very important role in curbing China's aggression in South China Sea, especially where Australia, Japan, India, and America, all 4 countries together, India being a strategic partner, being its neighbor, they're going to play a very important part. And since you mentioned about US, Solomon Island, I'll give you a small example of Solomon Islands for the other audience, for the civil audience to understand this. Solomon Islands is a group of about 800 to 900 islands, small islands, and they are not very well organized. So they're all scattered here, there. So what happens is when things are not scattered, it's difficulty to organize things together, right? We all have seen that I'll speak in colloquial language, in Bharat, bus mein ja rahe hote hain, so it's very difficult to get everyone fallen inside the bus after tea, if we stop somewhere. Similarly, so Solomon Islands signed a pact with Australia that Australia will look after its sovereignty, integrity. They had cargo issues, pirate issues, port issues, crime issues. But China, on the other hand, they tried to put their nose into it and try to intervene and try to get hold of getting that. So that, again, strategically, they would be closer towards America. If you see, the globe is round. If they position their troops, the navy, which is already a blue water navy, it will be closer towards America, if you see that way. So yes, similarly, what they are strategizing, India, definitely, I feel we have the capability to do that, sir.
Thank you. Well, all that remains is for me to thank the panelists for their presentations. And I can't help remarking that my opening statement about sea blindness was proved by the younger generation here who staged a mass walkout at the commencement of this session. Well, I think Chandigarh is 1,000 kilometers away from the sea. We probably have to work much harder. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral Arun Prakash, Dr. Sakuja, and Major Shah. May I now request the chairman of the Military Literature Festival, General T.S. Shergill, to please come up on stage and felicitate our speakers here. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We have a 5-minute break before we begin the next session.